The Constitution says that we have the right to consume cannabis.
Open up, Colorado. It's 420. Time to grind and burn.
This is not your son's stoner show.
And now, broadcasting live from the Dink Studios at 3835 Elm Street in Denver, Colorado. It's the Grind and Burn, a podcast from the Cannabis Community Project. Hey, Cannapreneurs. This week's show is sponsored by Dairy Berry's Recording Studio. Welcome, Cannapreneurs. Welcome back to the CCP radio show, the Cannabis Community Project, coming to you live right here from 3835 Elm Street. That's right, it's a dispensary, and I'm a cannabis show. What's harmony within the universe? Come on down, pick up some medicinal, recreational, whatever it is that you need to meet your cannabis needs. You can find it here at Dank, and you can also find me every Friday afternoon broadcasting right here from the studios. Wait a minute, you're all probably thinking, what do you mean Friday afternoon? I'm listening to you. It's Saturday. It's 4:20, right? All right, you got me. So I'm not doing this live. I'm really recording this on Friday afternoon. All right. Stone me to death. For all of you who come back week after week, who support me, who send me messages, who are part of this community and the true essence of what it means to be a cannapreneur. I want to give something back to you this summer in return for that loyalty, that dedication, that followership, listeners, subscribers, you guys right now listening to the show. Here's my invite to you. Coming up next weekend, June 9th. That's right, June 9th. This is coming up fast, so you're going to need to take action. There is an official CCP camping trip taking place down in Trinidad, Colorado. To be more specific, Morley, Colorado, the newly converted town of Morley that was taken over by our friends over at Viz.Red, who are taking over the town to create Bitcoin mining, cannabis growing in a whole community. Hopefully it doesn't turn out too much like the Charles Manson community, but a community nonetheless that we are doing a camping trip and inviting all of you, fellow fans, loyal followers, cannapreneurs that are supporting me. Here's your chance to hang out with a great group, me, my friends, my network, and other people within the community. We have 70 acres, so don't be shy. Bring your friends. Come on down. This is the CCP camping trip in Morley, Colorado, which is just south of Trinidad, but it's coming up June 9th, June 10th, which is just next weekend. If you're in Denver, you're in Colorado, you want to fly out here real quick, come on down. Bring your tent, bring your sleeping bag, BYOB. Other than that, thank you for all of you who sent the birthday wishes last week. To those of you sending me stuff in the mail, thank you. Particularly, I would like to thank one person who's been a great follower and supporter, who I don't think I've given enough thanks and gratitude to. Thank you to David at Nature RX Edibles, and this is a company you're going to want to pay attention to. Nature RX Edibles. It's coming soon, based out of Arizona here. This is an edible company. He was very nice. On my birthday, he sent me an edible. I took it over the weekend while I was out at the reservoir, hanging out, playing volleyball, listening to music, and I was on cloud nine. So thank you very much, David. That was an excellent edible, and based on that alone, I know your company is going to be very successful. So when you do go live, you do go public, you know where to come to, right here, buddy. You don't have to come to Denver. Maybe I'll come to you. We're going to have you on the show, and thank you for the months and months of constantly sharing the shows when they come out, following up on Twitter, and just being part of the community. For anybody else out there that would like to be part of this community and have your name and company mentioned and be part of the show in a segment, please contact me. That's what we're all about. We're about supporting each other, right? It's not about me, the host, out here trying to create a following for you guys to listen to me. There's very little I know, but I do know a few things very well, but only a few. The only way we're going to get this entirety of knowledge covered in this industry is by you guys. I can't do it alone. So you're going to have to come on the show. You're going to have to be the experts, the correspondents, and we're going to have to promote your businesses, right? That's what we're all about. And that's what I did this last weekend when I invested into MedX. Do you remember MedX? Go back to the archives and listen to the first show of 2016. MedX with Matthew Mills. I interviewed him, learned all about his company, about him, the whole deal, and spent the preceding 6 months investigating, doing due diligence, following the company, reaching out to other people who have invested, listening to other shows he's gone on and how he's talked about his company in comparison to how he talked about it when he was on my show, and really looked into the specifics of the proposal for the investors, the shareholders that he wrote out for everybody. And a combination of all of that finally brought me to the decision many months later to invest. And I invested. I took the 700 shares and I did it as a risk. And here's why it's a risk. Not because it was an overwhelming amount of money. It was because for my personal finances, it was a lot of money. Here's a shocker. Being a podcaster doesn't really make you rich. I don't really have any disposable income. I manage some small businesses on my own. I'm an entrepreneur. I make ends meet. We get my family moving forward. My daughter and my son get everything they need, but we don't have a lot of disposable money. We have very little savings. So when you're talking to families who are not investors, who are not wealthy people looking where to put their money that's just sitting around, any amount of money is a big risk. So investing in a company is risky. Investing in a company as an unaccredited investor, and that's what I am and what probably most people are, and all that means is you just don't make enough money. If you don't know what that means, you're not one of them, right? To be an accredited investor, you have to make so much money. You have to have a certain amount of assets, and you have to have a certain amount of, bona fide credibility that comes with your life and what you can show who you are. And that's just not a lifestyle that most people have access to, especially when you're in small mom-pop businesses starting out, and somebody approaches you and says, hey, would you like to invest in some shares of a startup company? Well, that's out of the question, right? You're just trying to put food on the table. How do you do that? And then on the top of that, they say, would you like to invest in this startup company? Oh, yeah, and it's about a cannabis product. Not directly cannabis, like they're not growing and selling weed, but it's kind of a cannabis-related product because it's a pesticide, which is, it's for growing, but it's mostly going to be used for cannabis growers because it's an organic, non-toxic type thing. And the big fear and hoopla in the industry right now is growing weed and how to regulate it with pesticides versus food that can be washed where the pesticides can be regulated differently because cannabis, you can't wash it. You're either eating it or you're smoking it, but you're definitely not washing it. So MedX is a big deal in that sense. And it's the first company to actually go out on a limb and publicly try to raise money through a crowdfunding platform to move its business forward. Matthew, the CEO, has his credentials. The company is in place. It looks good. It's a great product. So I took the step. I took the risk. And that is what makes me an entrepreneur, right? It's that element of risk. You see, I could take the safe route. I could easily go to a corporation and take some cubicle job making a decent mid-level wage, enough to be, decently satisfied in material things on a basic level. I wouldn't be satisfied with my soul, but I could do that. I could take a safe route of the world. And I say I could do that because I could. I have a master's degree in my field of study. I have 20 plus years experience in my field of study. I could go get a job in a very safe route. But that's not what being an entrepreneur is about. Being an entrepreneur is about taking risks and taking calculated risk. A calculated risk is one where you do your research, you do diligence, you analyze, and you make a decision. You may lose, right? You may lose your money, but it's a calculated risk. And that risk, and knowing that risk and being able to define the difference of that thin line is what will make you successful and what will definitely give you the ability to claim your status as an entrepreneur. Bang! So there you go. Keep grinding and burning. That's what it's all about. I'm now a company that owns stock in another cannabis company. I'm moving forward, and now it's time for you too. So let's keep moving forward on this show, and let's quickly look back at last week's show so we don't forget. Last week's show, if you remember that, where I was actually off for my birthday, but the week before that, Douglas from Weed Real Estate Inc. giving us the down low on real estate zoning and how the industry is going to move forward from a property standpoint. If you didn't hear that show, go back, like, share, and comment the whole deal, and then we'll slide into this week's show with Becca Williams from Free Speech TV's very first cannabis show, MJ Straight Talk. Here it is, Grind and Burn Cannabis.
Hi, I'm Douglas DeSanti. I've been in the commercial real estate business for 7 years, working for two major banks. I've underwritten over $1.5 billion in commercial real estate loans, and currently I'm a portfolio manager at a major bank with a portfolio of in excess of $2 billion of commercial real estate loans. And I'm starting a startup company called Weed Real Estate Incorporated, and we're going to be buying undervalued warehouse spaces and leasing them and buying them, going in, renovating them, and then selling them on the open market for double or triple the amount of capital we put into the building. We've had a lot of interest in that state regarding trying to obtain warehouse and dispensary areas that will be properly zoned. We've had a media outreach going on for the last month, in contact with a bunch of investors who are very interested in joining the company, and we plan on holding a crowdfunding event over the next month or two, I would say, at startengine.com, where we'll be selling shares of the company for investors, which will be priced at 2 cents a share, and they can get in at the ground level of a cannabis company that should grow at a pretty quick rate. The renovation's about $500,000 to $600,000 in the first building, and then I plan on selling that upwards of $1.2 to $1.5 million for substantial gains. Investors won't have to worry about, after the initial raise, of needing more capital to expand the company, because based on that initial investment and the sale of that first building, I'll be able to use that capital to rapidly expand the business. I feel like there's still so much potential in the industry, and such in its infancy stages right now, that 3, 4, 5 years from now, where we could be in this industry could be way ahead of where we are right now. And the growth potential projections from many analysts in the industry expect this to be a $20 billion industry in 4 or 5 years, where we're about a $6 billion industry today. I'd like to grow this basically to a $15 to $20 million business in the next 3 to 5 years, based on consulting services and real estate development. The reason why I feel like I can grow it to that potential is based on, after I make that first rehab and sell on the open market, I'll have double, triple the capital that I originally started with. So instead of working and concentrating on one building, 6 months later I can go and buy 3 buildings and do the same thing, and then put them back on the market for premium prices. I can raise up to $1 million based on SEC approval, but I'd like to keep a tight share structure and make sure the early investors are well taken care of and see big growth. Being the CEO of a public company, I have to make sure I take care of my shareholders before anything, and make sure that they see a return on their investment. And I really appreciate you having me on the show. It's great talking to you about the industry and my company.
Excellent. Likewise. Thank you very much. And we'll be in touch again soon.
All right, sounds great.
Last year, there was over 200,000 people that came to Colorado. How many of them came to start a business? The competition is heating up. So if you have a business, an idea, or just some thoughts about cannabis that need to be shared with the community, do it on this show. Contact me at brainstorm@cannabiscommunityproject.com.
I just think we can be such a healthier society.
Cushly organic products. It eliminates odor, and it's organic and it's non-toxic. I use it myself, and many of my close friends and family use it. www.cushly.com.
The 6 degrees of Cushly. Yeah, it's amazing.
We always need people, especially genuine people, right, to come back on, contribute to the show, to be part of the show. I call it the Cannabis Community Project because I consider it to be a community show. So anybody that's part of this community, it's essentially your show. So consider it your platform, your microphone, right? I'll just do the editing.
Got a love light in his eye, going on down again. Oh, when it gets like that, going on down again, makes a fire inside of me, going on down again, takes everything I can give, going on down again. Song spinning in my head, going on down again. flowing over me, going on down again. Rock me in the river, gonna make me come clean, going on down again. Give me, take it high, straight into a mystery. It's sending.
Hey, I'm Becca Williams, and it's such a pleasure to be here with and talking about me. I am the executive producer and host of both a YouTube series called MJ Straight Talk and a national weekly television show called Marijuana Straight Talk as well. And the tagline is, we are uprooting the stigmas and stereotypes of cannabis and the people who use it. And I like to think that we're building a bold and unique cannabis-focused media company here that really envisions changing the course of history as to how our country thinks and interacts with the cannabis plant. And we're doing it differently the way I look at it. We are really embracing social justice so that it's an equitable playing field for all who want to get into it, for economic justice. So for those who are in it, we're looking at livable wages and benefits, racial justice, of course, for our brothers and sisters who are people of color, where the war on drugs has heavily come down on their shoulders, and environmental justice, where we really want to see all of us involved in this arena, a lighter footprint on the planet, and however that looks for businesses that are using, for instance, lots and lots of energy, perhaps look towards solar, and that's just a very small peek into environmental justice. And, you know, at its essence, the cannabis plant has the ability to expand consciousness in relationships with ourselves and with each other. And in doing so, we can catalyze revolutionary social and political change. And that's where we come down with our website, with our YouTube channel, with our television show. We really bring on the voices that offer us various alternatives to this trek in corporate and big pot avenues. So this, what we're looking at and offering, is an alternative to that.
Very nice. And Free Speech TV is probably the best place for you based on that description you just gave. I can't imagine what other network would be a better place.
I'm so glad that you're familiar with Free Speech. Free Speech TV network is on Dish and Direct to the tune of 40 million households. They get about 1.2 million viewers a month, so that's nothing to sneeze at. And we are in the company of the likes of Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman and the Tom Hartman Show and Stephanie Miller's show, on and on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Tom Hartman is where I was introduced to Free Speech TV a few years ago when I had Dish Network. I was listening to his on-air radio program and then the crossover with his TV programs where I get introduced to it. And then I started seeing all the other shows and I was like, yes, this is the type of TV that we need. Because when people think of like NPR or public radio, you know, national broadcasting, free TV stuff, they're always going to think boring. Free Speech TV is not boring.
And it's much more progressive. Free Speech TV network is public, as you point out, but it's unlike the public broadcasting system or National Public Radio. Now, both of those network entities, as not-for-profit, still get federal funding, which means that they are beholden to whomever is in office and in Congress and doling out that money. So we have seen a very deliberate tightening up, for instance, on NPR and PBS as well, around what they cover and how they cover it. And there is a trend around being very conservative. Free speech is powered by the people. Powered by the people. You always have to kind of soften your P's on that. And so that we can tell the truth with a capital T. And I am just so excited to get a green light from that network in order to do this.
So help me understand how this type of media affiliation works, because they're on Dish Network, right? But they're not on cable. First, help me explain that. Why? Why does Dish have to run them, but cable doesn't?
Cable, corporate media, makes a distinction and what do I want to say, conservative programs. They allow networks on that keep within that corporate media mentality. Dish and Direct has been an enduring partner with free speech over the years. And so the big deal is that those 40 million viewers, generally speaking, on Dish and Direct are in homes where they don't have access to cable. Now, as we drive around Denver, of course, you'll see a lot of balconies and condos with the Dish or Direct dishes on their balcony. But by and large, when a city contracts with a very large corporate cable entity, they have to cover the entirety of the metropolitan area. And so what we find with Dish and Direct are a lot of people who are in rural areas where cable will not come in. So it's sort of an interesting piece, not to get into the weeds around free speech itself, but free speech is watched in a lot of red states, for instance. And so conservatives have their ear to the ground around what free speech is broadcasting. And I know that they'll get some nasty letters from time to time from red state citizens, you know?
Well, I focus on it not because an issue of just simply media outlet, but because I think there's some correlation between free speech TV and the cannabis movement, the cannabis industry. So it's not just a media outlet. Free speech TV about introducing ideas that people aren't going to get on the mainstream is kind of the only outlet places like cannabis have, because mainstream big media is not going to focus on it in the way we need people to focus on it. So free speech TV and some of the others out there that are similar based media outlets, that is where the cannabis industry is going to have its teeth in the media game, other than doing our own stuff like podcasting and this type of stuff. But from a platform, a national platform, we need stations, networks. We need people watching, because eyeballs, right? That's where the power comes in. Eyeballs and ears.
So I consider myself a recovering television reporter. I started out in television and spent a lot of years there as a producer, as reporter, and on-air talent.
Where was this?
This was in various markets across the Midwest, and most recently in Chicago.
So your background is in news media.
Yes, it is. And the idea in news is that every morning when you wake up, you look at the landscape and you go, well, what is the most awful thing that's happening across that horizon? And you head directly into it. And so I realized after a number of years how negative that is, that I'm immersed in that negativity and I'm reporting about that negativity, which we call news because it's the bad things that are happening. And I started asking myself at the end of the day, and how did I contribute to the better good? And it wasn't making much sense. So I moved into National Public Radio, and then it was a little better, although there's still about if it bleeds, it leads. And I found from National Public Radio, the long forms, the storytelling was where my juice was. And so I really came away with even a better idea of how to embrace a story and how to tell a story, because that's what we're all about. When we get together over coffee or we go to our family at the dinner table, what are we doing? We're telling stories. And so it's very powerful. And that's what I am taking and applying to this whole multimedia platform that we call Marijuana Straight Talk.
Well, it's like the show This American Life that's been on forever, right?
Yes, Ira Glass worked with us at WBEZ.
Right?
Yes.
It's one of my podcasts on my list. I listen to it. There you go. I mean, without podcasting, I would not listen to that, because I don't listen to terrestrial radio and I don't really have a lot of access to terrestrial radio. Not because it's not available, it's just not accessible in my lifestyle.
And terrestrial, when I think about that, I think of like a tortoise with an antenna on it. Right. But what it is, for everyone who doesn't know what terrestrial is there is a high antenna placed in the ground in any municipality or county or wherever, and then they broadcast at a particular wattage, and they can go out just within a neighborhood, a few miles. You can be like WLS in Chicago, that I don't know what 50,000 or 100 watts, where you can hear them on a clear night for thousands of miles either way.
Clear channels, the original clear channels.
The original clear channels,
yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the power of this type of media. Is I listen listen to that program because it's such a story-based, and I wish I could produce that type of media, but that takes a little bit more resources than I have within my reach at this point to produce that type of segment of a produced story. But I listen because of that, and I think that's why probably millions of other people listen, and that's the power of media. But if it weren't for outlets outside of the mainstream, those things go away. And if those media, the voices go away, then the businesses don't have a place to speak, which means eventually we go away. So you, I, in this media game, we're kind of playing a vital role that I see it, is we're helping bringing those businesses that don't have a voice out into the public. And that's why I really take it very seriously when I meet with a mom and pop that's just a small little startup, like some of these products I was showing you, people out of their homes selling products. There's no way a CBS, ABC, iHeartMedia would ever have them into their studio for a segment. Well, here I am,
It's vital to be able to embrace and frame those small, independent, decentralized businesses that are supporting a local living economy. And that's one of the pieces that is really important as we move forward here with Marijuana Straight Talk. And so once I got out of conventional or mainstream media, and I worked for WBEZ in Chicago, the NPR affiliate there, for a number of years. And then I had a crisis in my life where a family member was diagnosed with chronic lymphocytic leukemia. And we went through the rigors of the conventional medical system. And they basically told this person and us that we can't do anything for you right now. You definitely have this disease. So go home, wait to get more sick, and then maybe we can do some radiation or something. Well, that really pissed me off at the time. And so I started studying and researching and finding alternative and holistic approaches, particularly herbs. And so we put our family member through a regimen that was called the Macrobiotic Diet, which is basically vegetarianism. And he was not taking any drugs at the time because, remember, it was too early. We were waiting for him to get sicker so that he could. And so he went back in to the doctors in, I don't know, it was 7 or 8 months. And it turned out that his blood panels had come around totally back into the normal range. And I said to the doctor, I was very excited and started talking to him about nutrition and supplementation and what I had done. And he basically patted me on the head and said, there, little girl, nutrition has nothing to do with it. And so I realized, equipped with all these skills in multimedia that I had, that it really was something that I could take on, because I realized how passionate I was about getting this information out there, because, we're predicated in our healthcare system on drugs and surgery. So I wanted to tell a different story. So I went back to school. I dropped off the edge of the earth for 4 years and studied nutrition and became a registered dietitian in order to work from the inside so that I could poke holes in conventional medicine and talk about alternatives without being called a fraud or a witch doctor. So what goes around comes around, and here I am. There's a lot of things that happen between then and now, but embracing the plant, which is essentially this wonderful, remarkable herb. So I worked in the eco-sustainability world. I became the editor of the largest magazine of its kind in the nation called Conscious Choice, which was about living lighter on the planet, holistic and healthy living, and personal growth and development. And I became editor of that magazine, as the largest of its kind in the country. And from there, really got into that roundabout about that holistic living. So if you are eating organic food, why are you eating organic food? It may be because it's healthier for you, but also the pesticides and the herbicides are poisoning our earth. So it's a much bigger holistic story also. And while I was doing that, I was working for, among other things, working for a network of family magazines that had like 5 or 6 magazines around the country. And I was their national health editor. And it was big on my radar screen that people were using cannabis for pain relief. Well, at the time, I chose not to talk about it because I would be encouraging people, families, to do something illegal. So I let it go at that and really come back to really honor our valued advocates and activists whose shoulders we stand on right now as we move forward in this arena. There we are. I took that information, and there were a few years and other things that I did in between, but then it came to my attention that there really wasn't anything factual or informational regarding this slice of the cannabis life. So I realized, having the chops around television and storytelling and executive producing, that we could create this platform where we could talk about the real deal and how we need to have a dual track. Yeah, as big pot coming in, you better believe it, baby. And pharmaceuticals and all the other big corporate entities are coming in, and you talk to anybody who's deeply into this, and you know this as well as I do. They're poised, and as soon as the feds lift the prohibition, they're just rushing in. And we're early enough right here, right now, to create an alternative track of education and information for our citizenry, and being able to boost and support companies that are either small or medium, or perhaps larger companies that have a framework of social responsibility that they're baking into it. Like Whole Foods, for instance. I mean, you could criticize Whole Foods until the cows come home, but they're doing a lot of things right for a big corporation. And in this economy, it's all about growth, which is something I have a real issue with anyway. But if somebody is going to grow, then they might as well grow the right way and be encouraged and nurtured to do that. So that is the big idea that we're creating with Marijuana Straight Talk.
Hence the name Straight Talk.
And on that, I was born and raised in that conventional mainstream media approach of you're talking about something, you give it, if it's a point counterpoint, you give it, about 4 minutes. And you have, for instance, somebody talking about marijuana is good. And then you have somebody talking about marijuana is bad. And there's nothing to hang your hat on. There's no real education. It's just sort of this vapid back and forth that kind of goes up into vapors. And so what we're doing with our media company is reframing the conversation with the understanding that the evolution of cannabis is here and it's unfolding before our very eyes. And we have the opportunity at this early point to make a difference with it. So that reframe is about bringing in the leading voices for how we do this. So for instance, let's talk about descheduling or rescheduling and having thought leaders come in and talk about it and educate our citizenry. We just can't do it in this hit and run environment of regular mainstream media.
All right. And unfortunately, what you're describing, your involvement into the industry required kind of a sad situation. And I've said it many times. We have to be able to find a way to get through to people without tragedy being the catalyst, right? Without a family member getting cancer or somebody's children getting leukemia or something else. There has to be a way to communicate with people short of them suffering a horrific situation, which unfortunately everybody I talked to who was not previously really in the industry only really got here because they were involved in some type of sad situation.
You make such a good point, because I know as a journalist who is a nutritionist also. Now, I never practiced. I went back to the school and studied and got that degree and credential, registered dietitian, in order to discuss with the leading lights and luminaries around alternative and holistic and what we call integrative medicine. And what I found was, just as you're saying, and this is in integrative medicine, is that people don't step up and out of the mainstream paradigm until something has happened to them. The two biggest cohorts is someone who has been through the ringer, for instance, with cancer, and is on their last dying gasp, limping into an integrative medical doctor and saying the radiation and the chemotherapy and the surgeries did not work. What can I do? And the other piece is mothers with young children, because they want to prevent it from happening. And so you're absolutely right. We need to take that around to being able to talk about cannabis, not only from a medical standpoint, but what it does for our well-being. And I got to tell you, this is where my roots started. I come from what we call deep developmental trauma. That means childhood trauma, very abusive, and mentally, physically, sexually. And so I get touched when I start talking about it. Excuse me. When I hit college, and I was a young woman who was riddled with anxiety and panic. Well, all the time, mostly, because if you have to watch and fear for your very safety within the confines of your childhood, of your with your parents, what does that do to a young child? Every day, watching what's going to come at you and how it's going to come at you. So what happens when we move into adulthood, we don't reset those emotions, those heavy emotions. We bring those with us. And when we are out and about in business or work or relationships, those same limiting self-beliefs and dysfunctions, those woundings are carried with us. And so when I was in college, I was introduced to cannabis. You know, some of my friends, rolled a doobie and we passed it around, and there was something magical that happened during the course of that time. And I realized it was lightening my load. It allowed me to be more present and settle down. And so it, at that point, became, from here to now, through all those years, an enduring presence in my life. So I frame it as health and well-being, because recreational, that term, or adult use, is a little off the mark, because we want to say it's either or. It's medical, or you're just kind of fooling around with the baby and it doesn't matter. Make no mistake about it. When we sit and commune with friends and share a joint, we are being wrapped in an energy that lifts us and supports us. And so another huge piece of this media company is about not only the outer environment, but the inner environment, the inner terrain. And I have become, over the years, a teacher of this plant spirit medicine, cannabis. And I have studied it, and I have moved with it through various disciplines to marry the two, and have found great efficacy in doing that. Now it's anecdotal. It's what I call secular spirituality. And it's something that is just coming out of the dark now. There is a whole arena of spirituality out there where because of my own experience, I was looking for some healing. I was looking for something beyond smoking my cannabis, partaking of my cannabis. And then once I was out of that, back to the anxiety and the panic and the fear and the apathy and sadness and grief. And I mean, it was just a whole plethora, the whole spectrum of heavy emotions all wrapped into one big ball of wax for me. And I know that being out there, it's almost like people recognize something energetically in me and step forward and start talking about their own pain and woundings in their life. And so along with all these other things on this media platform, I am creating a space for people to come forward and to learn how to support the exploration of the far reaches of consciousness with the support of cannabis. That's where my passion is right now, and I think it needs to be both inward and outward, so that we can take that healing and bring it into our outward life, so that we are able to interact in a peaceful nature with other people. And our jobs, our business, I mean, when it comes right down to it, it's all about interactions with other human beings. I'm also a specialist in leadership and team organization. And it really is very much about inviting people to get to know themselves. It's an inside job. And cannabis helps and supports that. And there needs, up to this time, you'll find in the literature a lot of references to, smoke a joint and meditate. Well, there's much more to that, much, much more. And I have found that not only can it support solace and peace at that moment, but with work, with combining other disciplines and the support of cannabis, we can actually do real hardcore healing.
Well, there you go. There's the power of podcasting right there.
I have a regular discipline, and I used to lead circles not associated with cannabis. And what I'm going to start doing now is being able to lead circles with people who want to have that support with cannabis also and go deep.
Well, that is a great backstory, and that really gives me some good insight into where you're coming from. I don't think we could have ever got that if this were just a single-page blog or 2-minute little segment.
I have to say that we have more than 100 videos on our YouTube channel now. If I might be able to give a plug to that,
please do.
MJ Straight Talk. Of course, MJ is the abbreviation for marijuana. MJ Straight Talk on YouTube. Over the last year and a half, have visited this and talking about my own personal experience and how to commune with the plant and being able to create a container, and that it's important to be able to create a space where you can go by yourself, and even more important, to make that space for yourself, because what we have right now is a very unhealthy society. I might even go so far as to say sick. And no wonder that 1 out of every 5 people is on some kind of mood medication. And that's only the ones that are counted by people going in and seeing their doctors. People are on their screens all the time because it's a distraction from the problems that are eating at them, the mental chatter in their heads. I often call it the itty bitty shitty committee. I have a friend who calls it the mad uncle, where we want to do something, we have a desire to do something, and then there's these voices that come in to tell us that we're not good enough, we're inadequate, we don't deserve that. And all of this I have been moving through for many, many years, and it's an affliction. We cannot have close, honest, authentic connections with people when we have all of that noise coursing through our head. We have to find a way to move it out, to meet it. I don't want to say get rid of it, because our emotions are very important. What we want to do is find ways to identify those voices, meet them, listen to them, and move that energy into a different space.
It sounds like you're using media for a similar reason I'm using it for, to find that connection and interaction with people as a way to express yourself. I am naturally by nature a very shy and timid person. I have very low self-esteem. And I find it very difficult in interpersonal interaction. I find myself more comfortable in front of groups than I do one-on-one, which is why I love the control that this podcast gives me. Because when I ask you to put on the headphones and get in front of the microphone, you're in my environment, and I feel much better.
Isn't that interesting that you found a workaround, and at the same time, when you take off the headphones and leave the mic and go out and navigate in your daily activities, that feeling can come back and rush back in a big way or small ways, depending on basically what we encountered in our formative years as children.
Yes. I mean, as soon as we take off the headphones, I find myself very uncomfortable in interpersonal situations.
We'll need to have you in for what I'm, a cannabis gathering. And I'm also going to be inviting people who are new initiates to the cannabis arena, perhaps have never tried it before, but want to come to Colorado and do it. And I want to create a safe environment for them to learn how to do it with a poignancy. Can it be fun and inspiring? Absolutely. But, all those people who say, I can't partake of cannabis because I get anxious. Those people with anxiety, it's always there for them to a lesser or greater degree. And this is, I speak from personal experience, where at the moment, if I'm not experiencing anxiety, you better believe that it's on the back wall of my brain and breathing like wallpaper. And if I happen to partake of, a hit or two of cannabis, that anxiety can come rushing to the front and just flood every sense that I have right there and then. And we find that happening over and over and over again. And so I have a way that we can work with those people. It's disciplined. It takes commitment and courage to bring those scary feelings up to the fore and look at them and being able to work with them in a way where it's changed around and they become our friends.
Yes, which is why I think a lot of people, when they get high, their anxiety is a misinterpretation of what the high is presenting to them. I also will get, very high and have self-reflective thoughts that are not what you would go, oh, this is not a happy high experience. This is not a hippy-dippy experience. No. But THC is doing something to your body that's giving you an opportunity. And if I don't like what it's showing me, I will get very anxious, right? Just like...
A very, very, very good point. The videos that I have done on this are some of our most viewed videos, which means there is a screaming need for more of this. And I get all kinds of comments from people over our website, which, by the way, is mjstraighttalk.com, or through YouTube comments, through email, and they will say exactly what you're saying, that, Becca, thank you so much for sharing those most intimate details, and I'm finding that I need to go in and be quiet more and more because I came from a very traumatic background. One woman just recently said, I need to leave that scene, and I go into another room or another space and just cry and just cry. And you know what? Crying is not a bad thing. I've done a lot of crying, a lot of sobbing and whining and wailing because that moves the energy. It moves it up there for you to see, and it can move it out within the right framework with the right guide.
Well, that'd be a normal function of an emotional reaction. Something happens, you react, you cry, it comes out. The issue comes, people like me, is when something happens, you don't react, it doesn't come out, and then it comes out somewhere else in some other weird place, and you don't know why you're crying at the Buick commercial you're watching on TV, right? I don't know if it's as simplistic as just saying it's men versus women, it's this versus that. My brother died of leukemia just a few years ago. I did not cry. I did not have a standard emotional reaction to that. Was unable to, and find myself oftentimes seeing things slip out in other weird, bizarre ways. And because I could rationalize it back to that point, I think, well, there's obviously something going on, and I think I know where it's rooted. I think it either has to do with this, or maybe a little bit further back with my dad, or maybe a little bit, I'm looking for answers, which is kind of what it sounds like you were doing. And, you suffered something pretty extreme, and you spent most of your life kind of looking for the why.
And I do believe that there's a huge population out there looking in the spiritual realm. We call them seekers. And we may take on some kind of spiritual clothing, whether that means bendy or, the clothes that we wear or what we follow. And what I realized was that it was a stroking. It was a stroking to try to stroke that emotion down. And what we really need to do is bring it up. So the spirituality piece that I have pursued, and what I need to do is I'm in the midst of formulating a book, and what I need to do is enumerate the number of disciplines that I have touched across my lifespan to get to this point. And I just kept digging and digging and digging because the suffering drove me to find more. What came to me in meditation at one point was has a word, which I have since trademarked, and it's called canonaut. So it's canonaut like psychonaut or astronaut, where like a psychonaut, we are exploring the far reaches of consciousness. A canonaut is that we are exploring the far reaches of consciousness with the support of cannabis. And I am a canonaut. I think that there is a bubbling community out there of canonauts and canonaut wannabes. They just need direction and guidance, and that's what I'm offering.
So somebody calls me a psychonaut. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
So a psychonaut is a well-worn word in the psychedelic community.
Okay.
Well, psycho is about the mind. It means that we are going deep.
Okay.
Well, for a psychonaut, I know that term psycho, like like psycho is crazy, but that's not the case. So there is a whole community out there who routinely use psychedelic drugs to
DMT, ayahuasca,
to go deep, and
psilocybin,
exactly so. And those are psychonauts.
Okay.
What I am saying, and so loosely, people who talk about psychedelics sort of throw cannabis in there as an ancillary sort of cousin of what you just mentioned.
Right.
But I have to say, the beauty of cannabis is that we can use it more regularly than we can psychedelics. It's a lighter touch approach, and we need to go in and be our own guide. And I have to say that in this 21st century, self-therapy is where it's at. I can teach and guide someone to do this, but the idea is that they will not be tied to me for the rest of their life or my life, or think of me as a guru. A teacher, yes, but a teacher who is saying, here, I am sharing this important information with you so that you can be able to independently heal yourself.
Yes. Okay. I understand now what that is. I never heard that term before, but now that I hear it, I think I would like to be a psychonaut. Is canonaut and astronaut? Sure. Why not? I'm a micropsychonaut. On a monthly basis, I do microdoses of psilocybin, very small amounts, barely noticeable amounts.
And I am a big proponent of microdosing with cannabis.
Yeah.
It depends on where I want to go and what I do. And over the last number of years, I use myself as a guinea pig, experimentation. I want to call it communing, because that meditation, for years I tried to meditate. It was one of the things as a seeker that I did. And sitting on a cushion and trying to clear my mind of thoughts, and if a thought floats through like a cloud, then I usher it out. Well, that's just, that I don't want to deprecate anybody else's practice, but I found that was not particularly helpful for me. And I would go to workshops, and I would go to retreats and trainings, and I would read books, and I would feel great, while I was in that environment, and, all ready to go out and going, oh, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the thing that's going to heal me. And I would walk out, and, a couple of hours later, a couple of days later, those emotions, those heavy emotions would be coursing right through. They would just come and slap me in the head, and I'd be right where I started. And it would be, oh, shit.
That's almost parallel to a drug use, right? Somebody seeking answers in an external something, a drug use, whatever it may be, in the state of that, their mind is altered, they feel what they want to feel, and then it ends, and they lose what they were looking for because it only existed in that state of being altered.
Well, I would submit that a lot of people don't know what they're looking for. So what we call this is a distraction. So the distraction can be, as I pointed out earlier, lots of screens, whether you're on your computer screen or your mobile device or whatever it is, and you're watching, reading, whatever, so you don't have to be in the present moment. And what we find in this society are numerous ways wants to detach and escape, whether it's pornography, whether it's food, whether one thing that I'm concerned about now is the way that a lot of particularly millennial men are using cannabis because their tolerance has gotten so high from the couch lock that they're seeking that their concentrates nearing 100% THC, that they got to take that to knock themselves out so they can escape the reality that they're in right here, right now. And it's because it hurts. We are a walking wounded society, and medical paradigm doesn't help us either. What about the pain meds, right? Here, just take one of these and look at the opiate addictions. The one advantage I see to cannabis and having that dependence for an escape on cannabis is that you can come back from it. We can reach out and say, here is a hand up for you to come back to us and no harm done. Right? Whereas opiates, pain meds, all these other things can kill people, can maim them where they're irretrievable. But cannabis, for the time being, I mean, I have no idea. There's new ways. You probably know more about this than I do, to find a way to just distill that THC so we can just get it. And there's a whole culture built around that, right? Where I think Mass Roots promoted the top YouTubers not too long ago. The host is all about getting as, effed up as you can and still function. And there's people sitting at home who are doing it with them, and they're lonely, they're lost, and that's what these outlets are for.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them because I go through a weekly frustration of looking at other shows that are getting far more audience views than mine, and then I listen to their show and go, so I guess that's what people are looking for. But I avoid most of those topics myself because I come from a background similar to what you're describing, where something happened and it made me want to take action and get involved in the industry. Well, I tend to just avoid people who are looking for just the stoner side of life. I don't really indulge that on my show. I don't really go to a lot of events where that's what it's all about. And for me, my consumption creates a more inspirational effect than a couch lock effect. I mean, when I'm using, I feel more productive. I work more. I do more. But I'm also self-medicating. I suffer from my own issues of depression and rage and anger and everything else, and trying to figure out just how to work around it, how to self-medicate, how to get through life, how to figure out what to do tomorrow, today.
You named it. You just named it. What the vast majority of citizens are doing. I hate the word consumer. I really tend to avoid that. However, it's codified in our language in this society. The idea that we have been turned into these machines that will consume, right? And so in business, it's always, well, are you B2B, which is business to business, or are you B2C, business to consumer? And I really want to change that and call that a citizen. What we have done is turned everybody into a consumer by creating an environment to say, you know what? You're hurting? You'll feel better if you buy this, or you take this, or you do this. And so we have all of these people who are actually consumers / seekers looking for some sort of relief because they're so bereft of any kind of peace.
And those are the stories that I'm trying to get at. Those are the stories I think people really want to hear, but there's no outlet. So, I mean, when I do
work
the show,
that you're doing.
Well, I look at it as the long form, right? Is to just let people talk. Just let people talk. I mean, I clean it up afterwards, but I don't change people's content, and I don't cut them down from a half hour of talking to 2 minutes of talk. I just let people talk. I just make them sound good. But it's therapeutic for me, and I think it's therapeutic for my guest, even if they think they're here just to talk about their company. What I realize is I sit across from people, and I'm looking at them, and they're talking about whatever their little device or knickknack is. They're talking about their life, and then they start talking about where the idea came from and how they got started and how their mom gave them $5,000 and they put their credit card, and then they went through this. And then before you know it, you have somebody's whole life that's developed, and you understand why they are where they are today. You feel like you know somebody. You have a small little friendship.
Versus those people coming into this space and saying, I have X millions of dollars. Where can I make more X millions of dollars? And I don't know what to say about that. It's business as usual, and we're seeing it business as usual in this cannabis space. And I think that what you and I are talking about, we will find our own allies within that arena. I know that they've been coming forward. They've been saying, yeah, we need to do something about this incessant march toward commodifying this wonderful plant and making it just like anything else in this country. The reason why you have a podcast and that I have a media company around cannabis is because it can revolutionize our society. I oftentimes have read Bernie material, Bernie Sanders, and he brings it back around to the little guy. And how do we support and enrich the little guy with this wonderful plant? And I keep coming back to it's a two-prong approach. It's the outer and it's the inner. And if we can, in this media company, become a trusted guide for people, and decentralized. I mean, even though this is a national show, there's absolutely no reason with all our other platforms that we want to promote the interactivity so that people will get to know each other in their various neighborhoods and communities across the country. At the same time, we want the people in Maine to know about the people in Arizona. And that is what this, 40 years of war on drugs, the 80 years of illegalization, the propaganda has really polarized us from one another and made us suspicious. And I put forth the latest stat is 61% of people are in favor of legalization across the board of cannabis. Of course, there's some technicalities if you get into the small print there, but that's basically it. That means that 39% of the people, and this was a survey conducted by the University of Chicago and AP, that means that 39% of the people out there are saying no for a reason. I would say that a good percentage of them are sitting on the fence because they don't know. And a lot of them, it skews older because they've been under this constant pressure of this disinformation campaign. And I oftentimes liken it to, in our television show and our platform, we are not only catering to enthusiasts who've been there for years and years. We're talking about people who are just dancing on the edges and coming in. And a lot of them are standing on the edges and going, well, I wish I knew more about it. And so it's really about the opportunity to give them the information in the context of, here, help grow your community.
How do you take all of that you just given all of us and approach the executives at Free Speech TV and make them understand without sitting down for 48 hours and just delivering it? How do you actually put together a pitch?
Right. I had to go to the board. It was an extraordinary circumstance because of the subject matter. And for one, my background as an executive television producer, and of course being associated with National Public Radio carries some weight too, and the other bona fides that I have as being on-air journalist and being able to importantly identify and groom talent.
Help me understand how you even got to that point, because I assume it wasn't day one, hey, we should start a show, day two, let's meet with the board. There was a whole bunch of stuff that
there were conversations, absolutely.
Ooh,
with the production manager.
How do you have a conversation with Free Speech TV?
With the executive director. Well, remember, they're people powered. Okay. They're not NBC or CBS,
so you just picked up a phone and called them? You sent them an email?
I had an ongoing conversation.
Was it a cold call type situation that slowly developed?
No, I have a friend who knows a friend who put the buzz in somebody's ear.
Okay. And then you slowly started developing a conversation, kind of working with the idea.
Right. Well, I had to have a treatment.
So they immediately said, come in and give us a treatment, or they little by little said, well, we'll think about it.
So the executive team was on board with it.
Immediately.
Well, the way, my bona fides speak for themselves in the sense of it instills trust. So the big deal that the board of Free Speech did was pretty much rake me over the coals for about 2 or 3 months in wanting to make sure that it wasn't going to be stoner-esque. And of course, my intention was being able to present professional reporting and commentary with a bent that, coming from my television roots as producer, I can call it infotainment, so that people want that you're talking about important, poignant subjects with some gravitas, but putting it in a way that people can hear it. So we go back to the storytelling. And what I have developed with this show, we've had 3 pilot episodes. We had 3 pilot episodes last year, and we had a 420 special in April, which, by the way, turned out to be, are you ready for this? The network's most popular, highest rated weekly program in all of 2016 so far.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, so that really showed again to them that there's this huge appetite for this show.
What was the time span from you kind of saying, this is what I'm going to do, to initiating that process to getting the meeting with the board? Weeks, months, days?
Months.
Months, okay.
Yeah, months
so it
that
took
they
a
gave
lot
me the
of
green light.
patience.
Yeah, and what I also did was realize that when you're bold and you step forward with confidence, allies show up. And there was a time that I was, in late 2014 when I was just putting this together. There was a speaker. I was in Portland, Oregon for a cannabis conference. And there was this incredible speaker, this man who talked about digital analysis and how you drive traffic and how you gather traffic. And of course, me coming from television, it just is jaw-dropping with all this analysis and the specialty and stuff. And I said, God, I really want to buttonhole him after he talks and talk to him about my project. And of course, he was mobbed after he was done. And it was so funny because I thought, all right, well, such as it is. And so I go out. It was in the convention center, long convention center that Portland has. And I'm walking toward the other end to see if there's something to eat, actually, and everything's closed. It's like on a weekend. And so I just walk out the side door, and guess who's walking up the hill having a cigarette? This gentleman. And the convention hotel is like 4 blocks away from the conference center. And we walked and talked, and he said that, he had developed Martha Stewart's whole platform for all of this stuff, and that and then we walked to the hotel, and he said, hey, listen, you want to sit down? I have some team members coming in, and, we'll have a drink. And so I said, okay, yeah, great. And so he had 4 people show up, all men it happened to be, and they started pulling my project apart and saying, okay, wait a minute, baby. First of all, yes, you have a television show that on paper it looks pretty good, but what you need is everything else branded. You need all the digital platforms along with all the social media. Doesn't have to be a lot of bells and whistles, but you need to have it branded. So it's like, oh my God. So I stepped back and I took about 3 months, put the TV show on hold, and developed all of that stuff. And so that we could move it, the idea is to move it forward all at once, right? And so that's just one example of the kind of allies that are showing up for us when we get to a point of what do we do next? And there's people or companies that just holding the space for us.
So you got the meeting and you gave them the pitch. Did you have to show them a demo reel? And
yes.
Those were the first 3 shows?
Yes, I had to create. I have what they call a sizzle reel. So,
okay.
so a sizzle reel, if you don't know what it is, or for those who don't know, they call it a sizzle reel because it's your idea and you're supposed to make it sizzle.
Did you make it sizzle?
For the viewer? Well, I did my best. I sold them.
And do they make a decision on the spot, or do you have to wait, again, more weeks and months?
Oh, yeah. It dragged out.
So 6 months total?
No, 3 months. So there's something called a first mover advantage. You don't want to get too deep in the weeds on that because that could drive you nuts. Because if you say, well, I'm first mover in this space right now, and then you're constantly looking for somebody else to come out. And, there is no shortage of cannabis-oriented media, but there's very little on television.
Were you the first that approached them?
Yes.
Okay.
Isn't that interesting?
Interesting only because maybe somebody could have got to it. It's not a thought I had. I never thought about approaching any of the satellites, even the free Denver community. So it's like, oh, yeah, of course. Somebody that makes
Somebody
sense.
has to be first, I guess.
Right, yeah.
And so from that sizzle reel, they were able to see where we were going and what we were doing.
And then how does that work? Do they offer you a crew and a place and a budget, or do you have to produce your own show and they buy it from you? How does that work?
I have to raise the money to produce the show.
Every single episode.
Yeah, and the only reason I've been able to get this far is because of my skill set, right? Just like you're able to do everything that's needed to pull this podcast together. For me, me as a television producer, as somebody who grooms and identifies talent, as somebody who can get on the air and also present, somebody who can write stories, I've been able to bootstrap this to this point. And so what has happened is we have gotten a really great interest from outside people who want to invest in this. And I was thinking small. I was thinking the television show, and then we get commercial sponsors. Commercial is really not commercial, since it's public television, underwriters. And so I thought, well, I'll do that, and la-di-da, la-di-da. Well, people kept coming and saying, I don't really want to be a commercial sponsor, but I'd like to look at investing in the company. And so that is what I've been focused on in the last number of months, is putting this whole business plan together for this company that is multi-platform.
Okay, so I want to understand the details of the production. Free Speech TV, are they a production studio or just a network of distribution? They're
a network and they have studios.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons why I moved from Florida to Denver, was to be able to shoot in their studio. So I have to actually hire their team and their studio in order to shoot the things that we have in the show. Having said that, their brilliant programming and production manager, his name is Alex Manis, said to me, because the popularity of YouTube with that casual, where it doesn't have to be perfect video, that, you're in somebody's home and
not all HD, 1080 stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So on telephone video and all of that stuff. And so, I come from a tradition of television news where you are sitting at the desk and I am going to tell you what it's about, and just very formal, right? Well, I did not want that at all. I want to be loose and relaxed. And so Alex said, well, why not fold in the YouTube approach too? Here, we're shooting from Becca's office. We're shooting from Becca's kitchen. We're, and by the way, we're on the set at Free Speech. So, and, just it's the old executive producer stuff. I like to open a show on a set, on a professional set, and in the show on a professional set. And then everything in between is kind of a patchwork, which allows us to really throw it up. I mean, we have some great characters and personalities on the show, and just in the 4 shows that we have done, including Richard Hayasika Harvey, who is based out in Massachusetts, and he is the editor for a very popular segment that we have called Artistic Say. And what he does is he identifies grassroots musicians, poets, however they are expressing themselves with their sentiments about cannabis. And so we have had, I think it's been all music videos for the 4 pieces that we've had. But I invite you to go to our website, mjstraighttalk.com. It all aired already, and it's now on video on demand, so you can just watch it.
I did see the 3 that are...
You watched them all?
Well, the 3. You were saying there was close to 100.
So there's a difference between YouTube and the television show. So we have 4 episodes, including the 420 special. We have over 100 videos.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see. I was like, well, I must be way behind, because just a couple months ago when I was introduced, there was only 3. So
yeah.
What's the turnaround time? What does it take to start a production and get it ready for air?
So you're talking to an old executive producer who put together a half-hour newscast every day.
Yeah, so you can do...
So I can produce with, a blindfold on in one hand, tied behind my back, actually. Having said that, we've really bootstrapped this whole thing. So it's taken longer because I have an editor and post-production editor and videographer who does work with me. We work very closely together. And along with the cast of characters who we have on the show, from Leland Rucker to Hayasika to Martin Lee, it goes on and on, that we're pretty much shooting that on our own until we get that show on regular weekly lineup, in which we will have a whole team of people.
And it'll be a once-a-week type production?
Yeah, it'll be weekly. Weekly half hour.
So you have to write the scripts beforehand yourself? You have to budget the crew that they're making you hire from their own staff, or can you bring in your own crew?
I want their crew.
You do?
Because
Okay.
their crew knows how to run the teleprompter. They
It's
know
all
how to,
their studio,
the TD
yeah.
and the director and the floor manager. Right. I want their crew. We do that, but then my editor and I will work from my home to my home studio to do pieces for the show, and that's where we shoot the YouTube videos on a weekly basis.
So there's not really much of a budget in the sense like they're buying a show from you or providing you with a budget to produce the show.
No, they don't do that.
They're giving you the distribution.
That's exactly right.
And you have to produce your own shows at your own dime with a minimum baseline because you have to hire out their crew. So there is a certain amount of money that has to be put in. You can't go too cheap.
That's right. And if you look, that's a model that's tried and true for PBS, for instance. You have production companies with a whole team, producers, who are enlisting or convincing the PBS station that here I have the money to produce this show. Or often it's ready-made and ready to go, and so it just needs to be sold to somebody who has a platform.
And are they participating in any monies you bring in through underwriting? Do you have to do a split with them?
I don't have to do a split, but in the near future, we may end up having to contribute.
Okay.
Yes, and I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, this little mighty network runs on about $3 million a year. I mean, that's pocket change for any of the big networks. I mean, they could gobble that up in, I have no idea, a day,
Right.
Depending on the production that they're involved in.
Yeah, and there's only like 4 or 5 studios, right? Like DC and Denver of the free speech TV studios where they do production.
Well, it depends because, so Tom Hartman has his own production studio. Amy Goodman and Democracy Now! Crew have their own production studio. So I think they're starting to do some of that where there's studios around the country. It's a littler, more modest studio.
Yeah. No, because I always try to find the outlets where the news sources are coming in. I am also watching Lee Camp, Redacted Tonight. I like his show. Mm-hmm. All these low-budget kind of news shows that are coming up, I really pay attention to them and watch them and like to kind of see how they develop, knowing their budgets are limited, because it gives me ideas to how to break through the bootstrap.
What are your aspirations?
To build this into what could be a daily or at least a 3 to 4 time a week type show, to have a team of 3 to 4 people assisting in production as well as producing stories, to be run off of combination of advertising, selling actual products, and being involved in events and parties and other things where we can also create revenue streams from. I would like to have different cannabis type shows. This one is kind of a business focused show where I try. It's, when you only have one show, sometimes you have to compromise the theme because there's no other outlets. Right? So sometimes I will talk to people that aren't necessarily business related, but just because I don't have any other outlet for them yet. So I would like to have like a show that just focuses on patients, a show that focuses on business, a show that focuses on different aspects of cannabis, and have a network of various podcasts and related media kind of under a single network that's all cannabis related, and then use that to expand into non-cannabis podcasts and eventually just make it a full podcast media company. Producing podcasts, I guess, would be my long-term goal, would be to be a podcast producer of various podcasts where I am the host of one or less.
Sure. Do you have a model?
For this show, yes. Just for this show.
Who?
Well, I use a little bit of what I get from all my other podcasts. So my show kind of reflects a little bit of Joe Rogan, if you listen to him.
Sure.
It reflects a little bit of Freakonomics I listen to, a little bit of Mark Maron that I listen to and how he kind of does his, and a little bit of Adam Carolla and how they do their podcast.
What about cannabis specifically?
This is going to sound like I'm just being an a-hole, but I've listened to many other podcasts that are cannabis related. And I do not have any others that I would firmly say, well, there is a show I'd like to model. I have personally not found any other podcasts that are cannabis related that I've been too inspired by.
What about Russ Balview?
I don't know who that is. What is his show?
He's been around for quite a while. He's based in Oregon. And Russ may be doing streaming audio, but I think he has a podcast, Russ Bellevue Show.
Oh, okay. No,
yeah. He might be somebody you could actually look at and talk to.
Yeah, what I do is I'll flip through iTunes and other shows, and I'll keyword cannabis, and I'll listen to other people's shows. It's not an issue of production, because I absolutely understand limitations on production. That is not what my issue is. My issue is usually content-based, and usually people who are not broadcasters, not admitting the fact they're not broadcasters, but yet still trying to put on a show as if they're broadcasters, and it's teeth grinding to listen to. And again, I'm not trying to be an a-hole. I think it's important to listen to the best end of the spectrum and the worst end of the spectrum, and you learn as much from both of them. Yes. All the podcasts that I listen to from a production standpoint that I'm trying to model are well-established podcasts by well-known celebrities and semi-celebrities who follow radio-style formats or their own podcast format, but it's just something that is very successful. In the cannabis realm, there's not a lot of shows that I've heard where I'm like, oh, there's a great show. And it's usually just content. It's just people just randomly babbling, no real direction to where they're going. Usually it's 2 or 3 people trying to do banter talk, which doesn't quite come off because they're not really professional broadcasters and they're not really funny people. And, so it sounds like if you're overhearing a conversation in a back room of somebody, which isn't necessarily broadcast material, it's maybe interesting on an eavesdrop type thing. So I work with other people in producing non-cannabis shows. I work with people who are not broadcasters, and I try to help them through this idea of let's not try to be radio, let's just try to be you, and let's figure out how being you can be authentic, but let's make sure we have a direction. So we start a show, we have a middle of a show, and we end a show, and not that 10 minutes in people are still going, what is this show about? What are people talking about? I'm lost already. I have no idea what we're doing. And there's some very popular shows. I mean, there's shows that are far more popular than mine who get a lot of audience, attention. The Cannabis Network Radio, they get thousands and thousands of listeners. For the life of me, I can't figure out why, because none of their shows.
Interesting.
It's just a lot of side talk. To me, whether it's a minute-long segment or an hour-long segment, there's a beginning, there's a middle, and an end. And if somewhere within the first couple minutes a person can't understand what your show's about or where you're going, there's a problem. And usually it's a problem that exists with people who don't understand somebody's listening to them or somebody who's just not trying, because anybody that's had any broadcasting experience would not start a show and spend the first 5 minutes babbling on about something that's non-relevant, not on topic, and going nowhere, because you're going to lose everybody. And right. I take the production I do as serious as the content, and the seriousness I want to give my guests. I want my guests to feel like I'm working for you here. When this show comes out, you will sound good, if nothing else. I can't guarantee I'll sound good, but you will sound good because I'll put a lot of time into making sure your audio comes out great.
That's the counterpart to a television producer. That's what I do. I like the container of a time frame. So I have 28 minutes for a weekly half-hour show, and the organization is important, that there is a certain cadence to the show. Now, within the segments, we're loose, we're relaxed, we talk easy, but make no mistake about it, we're moving it along.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah, which is why I do heavy post-editing. And I've had a number of people approach me about doing live streaming stuff, and the first question I immediately ask somebody is, what's your broadcasting experience? And 99.9% of the time, their answer is, I don't have any. If you've never done broadcasting, stand up and speak for 90 seconds about anything in front of a group of people and tell me how far you get. 30 seconds. Stand up for 10 seconds, right? And what the problem I see is people that don't have any broadcasting experience that want to do live streaming shows, they forget that you can't just talk about what you're staring at the wall and hey, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, that was cool. Oh, wow.
Well, so the Commons will decide based on viewership, yes? Listenership.
Yeah, to a point. I've always had this rant that I've gone on about, does popularity equate to quality, and does quality necessarily result in popularity? If we looked at out of context things like hamburgers, right? If we said, by pure popularity, McDonald's must be the best hamburger in the world because they by far outsell everybody else across the planet. Hands down, there's no competition even close. McDonald's is outselling everybody, so they, by default, must be the best, correct? Well, that's the kind of logic I think of, and that's how I motivate myself when I look at other people's high number shows and my numbers. My numbers never go down. They just don't hockey stick up. They kind of do this slow, week by week, pick up listeners and kind of keep going.
Organic.
Well, because I don't have the money to do a lot of advertising and stuff, so all I can do is depend on meeting somebody, having them go back and put it on their website or talk about it on social media, having that person's network maybe listen to this show because you're on it, and now they're exposed. They go back and listen to archives.
It's tried and true.
It takes a while, right? It takes a while. But this is why I do everything in post-editing, because I want you to sound good. I want me to sound good. I don't want us to sit here and try to live stream this and pretend like we have it all planned out and I got my questions. I mean, I do have my questions, but not that I'm going to Q&A you on. And when I start rambling like I'm doing now, I can go back and just edit it.
True. That is the beauty of post-production. I worked for years and years with live television. You need to have your ducks in a row. You need to be ultra-produced. I mean, my first wedding, I produced my first wedding, really. It was on paper as to who would be doing what when.
That's the job of a producer. Somebody's got to be organized and in charge. Somebody has to know where we're going in this whole thing. And usually if the talent's also the producer, it's too many things, right? Usually, which is hard, which is sometimes it takes away from my conversations, because as I am sitting here trying to be a host, I'm also having to think about how are we going to produce this, edit this, how what else is going to be in the show and the whole deal. So, I mean, it's all in time. But this has been a very long conversation, and it's been a great conversation. I feel like I've learned about you. I feel like I've had the experience to probably hear about your story that, honestly, I don't know where else I would ever hear you give a firsthand story like that, unless you were invited to speak somewhere. And even then, I don't know, with a group of people standing in front of you, if you would have given them the same delivery as you gave us today. So that, to me, that's the power of podcasting, right? The earbuds, that interpersonal, that intimate experience when people are out on the bus, gardening, doing homework, doing whatever, and they just have you in their ear. That's where the power comes from, and that's why I love it.
Truly, and thank you for creating this space for me to talk about this.
Thank you very much. Let's make sure to do your contact information one more time with all your social media, website, phone numbers, however you want people to come and talk to you.
The best place to go is our website, mjstraighttalk.com. Remember, there's 2 T's, one at the end of straight and one at the beginning of talk, mjstraighttalk.com. And you can really access all our television shows there. You can access our YouTube videos, some of my blogs, the Cannabis information, and I invite you to subscribe. We send occasional emails, newsletters that talk about what we're up to, which I think is always interesting. Of course, that's me, but from the feedback that we've gotten, that it is pretty intriguing. So we're in a space right here, right now, that is fascinating. And to be able to bring to it the sensibilities that you and I are bringing to it, and looking at a different paradigm, a paradigm shift that this plant can catalyze, I think is very important.
I think that message was communicated very well today, and I think if nothing else, that's what the audience is going to get, is just your personal relationship to what you're doing here, how you got started, and obviously the passion behind it. And if nothing else, let's get people over to Free Speech TV and get some viewerships over there.
Here, yes. But and let me just say that the way to do it is our website is that central nucleus for everything. So you can find everything, including Free Speech TV, including YouTube, by going to our website.
Very good. I assume you're keeping track of your clicks through there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Growing well.
Analytics. Fun conversations with advertisers. Well, thank you very much, Becca. This has been very informational and delightful. Feeling a little happier, actually, than I was when I first came down today. I was feeling a little down, and I feel happy. So thank you very much for joining me on this long conversation.
Thank you for your candor around that.
Excellent. That's it. Just like that.
Okay.
It's all over.
There you go, Counterpreneurs. That's all I have for you this week. Thank you very much for joining us. Make sure to come back next week. And after the show, you can always carry on the conversation with us on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google, Mass Roots, and so much more. Even YouTube. Stay involved because this is community. So next week, we're going to have more conversations that you want to hear, more guests that are going to help us take it to the next level. This is your show, so come back. We'll see you next week.